District 32, and I've got the absolute pleasure of having a conversation today with Kevin Humphreys. How are you, Kevin?
G'day, Lorraine. I'm great. How about you?
Excellent. Thank you very much. And how's life over in Brisbane?
It is fabulous. It's a little cloudy at the moment and a bit windy, but I'm still standing here in shorts and short sleeve collared shirt. Not that you can see the rest of my business attire for today, but yeah, it's a very nice day.
Beautiful, just like the newsreaders.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
So Kevin, you just did, you delivered a beautiful keynote presentation for District 32 members last week in the Gold Coast, which was amazingly received. You know, everybody your reputation is preceding you. But what I would like to do is, just give folks an idea of who you are, what you do, but in letting people know who you are, I'd like to know, how did you end up keynote speaking, and particularly in the areas that you do? What's your background? What's the lead up?
Yeah, if someone had told me a little bit longer now, 8 years ago, that I was going to be a keynote speaker and that would end up being my career path, I would have laughed at them. That was the last thing possible that was going to be happening 8 to 10 years ago. Kevin is a pretty average, I think Kevin's a pretty average guy. Grew up in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. When I was, sort of knee high, saw some guys in green uniforms run through the bush on TV, and I thought that was pretty cool. I want to go and do that. And then as a pimply-faced teenager, found myself out in the backyard watching rescue helicopters fly overhead. And I thought that looks amazing. And then I found out the Army had helicopters, so I was sold. And you can see by all these things behind me that they formed a pretty significant part of my life. And so I flew Black Hawks and Chinooks around in the Army for the better part of 20 years, and around most parts of Australia. I was a flight instructor in the United States, so I conducted humanitarian operations in Papua New Guinea. I served operational deployments in East Timor and Iraq and Afghanistan. And yeah, that was like what I was put on this planet to do. I just loved it until the wheels came off, and I had a mental illness crisis, contemplated suicide and whatnot towards the end of my Army time. Not because of the war zone though; it was actually because of the workplace, and so I ended up having a breakdown. It took 9 months, eventually got myself back to work. And when I did, although I was functional and back at work, I had this very deep-seated feeling of failure and shame and embarrassment around the mental illness and having a breakdown and contemplating suicide. And then I found out that the hierarchy in the Army, certain parts of the hierarchy in the Army had labelled me as damaged goods, and that I didn't have a career anymore. So I left the Army and went and started a civilian search and rescue career, flying that one there as well, and these couple of aircraft around. And that was through the Northern Territory and Queensland, a little bit in New South Wales. I did that for a decade, and as a flight instructor and a flight examiner and a chief pilot and a director of operations. And but along the way, I held my secret of mental illness and suicidal ideation because I was terribly, terribly embarrassed and ashamed by it. And it wasn't until I got some coaching, some business coaching, and the lady said to me, an incredible woman in Sydney, Michelle Duval is her name. And she said, Kevin, everything's going really well, but there's something you're not telling me. And anyway, she managed to pull the secret out of me. And then I ended up, talking about it publicly. One thing led to another. And before I knew it, I was getting asked to get on stage and talk to people about my experience. And every time I got on stage, someone else would say, Kevin, can you please come and do that at our place? I really need you to come and talk to my people. And so I did. And it was a part-time thing for a while, and about to go full-time, and COVID hit. And as it did to every service industry, small service business, basically destroyed it. And so just last year, got up and running again, and now been doing it, full time for about 12 months, and making a big impact wherever I go, is the feedback that I keep on being told. So yeah, and to be honest, I love it, just love it.
And that's what happens when you come from a place of authenticity. And it's a real person really sharing real stories from a real personal experience. That just gives another dimension for a keynote.
Absolutely does. Yeah, definitely.
But Kevin, take you back there. I found it really interesting that when you were talking about leaving the army, you know, you had those thoughts, you took 9 months off. How was that to go back there? That must have been, that's like another dimension then, even beyond the shame. To go back to the place that actually caused it or triggered it, or, you know, or allowed that to happen.
Absolutely. So I moved units, or headquarters. I was in a headquarters at the time, and I moved to a different headquarters, which at that time was actually literally across the road. So, you know, it wasn't even, you know, go to a different part of the base. It was literally across the road. And this is one of the things that I talk about with people, is that, you know, policies are really, really important for every organization to have, about what their philosophy is and what their policy is on how they manage A, B, C, whatever it is, right? The thing that we quite often forget is that policies are enacted by people, and until or unless you have a consistent application of a policy, because you actively train and support and guide all of your people to consistently apply a policy will be interpreted by you and by me and by anybody else however we interpret it. And some people, well, let's be reasonably blunt, some people just aren't that nice. And so the same policy around how to handle someone with mental illness, how to handle from a career perspective and return to work perspective and all the rest of it. It's the same policy on both sides of the road. But I tell you what, the way it was being applied where I left compared to the way it was being applied where I went back to, absolute chalk and cheese. And the unit that I went back to, my boss was an engineer. And let me tell you, I don't think it's a secret to say that most engineers aren't known for their empathy skills, right? But I'll tell you what, this engineer was brilliant. His name was Peter Clay. I'll forever sing his praises. And yeah, he called me in the office and he said, Kev, I know you're on a return to work program for 2 days a week. And at this stage, before I'm walking in, I'm thinking, I'm a senior officer. I've got no cast, no limp, no sling. But I'm only going to work 2 days a week. What are they going to say about me behind my back? And I soon realised that my paranoia was far worse than the reality. Most people, some people cared, and those who didn't care, it wasn't out of malice. It was that they had enough other stuff going on in their world, or they were more than comfortable with themselves. So they didn't need to worry about what was going on in my world. So my paranoia was the problem. But he called me in the office and said, I know you're on a return to work program. I don't need to know why. It's none of my business. I just need to know which 2 days of the week you're going to be here. And I want you to know that I want you to produce the goods of your rank and your experience just for those 2 days a week. I don't want anything more than that, Kev. That's just all I want. And he was just a brilliant example of how you have a conversation with someone coming back into the workplace after an injury or an illness, regardless of what the reason is for it. So yeah, it was great.
And is that a lot of the theme then that comes through some of your keynotes on how to have those conversations?
That's part of the theme. And the main thing I concentrate on is actually what I call noble self-leadership. And that's because I believe we have to be selfish to be selfless. And one of the things that I found with me, and as I say to people, a lot of what I talk about, I'd love to say it was all based on all of my successes, grandiose successes. Look at me, this worked, that worked, aren't I wonderful? Rubbish. A bunch of what I talk about is based on my mistakes, my errors, my misgivings, my lessons, and sometimes they're bloody hard fought lessons. So what I talk about is the art of keeping yourself healthy, keeping yourself well, but never for the purpose of self-grandiose, self-idolization. Always for the purpose, keeping yourself well, for the purpose of then contributing to others, contributing to society, leading others, and having an amazing impact on the world. And so, yeah, quite often with leadership, we get wound up talking about how everything is focused on everybody else. And as the servant leader, I depleted myself completely in many different ways, and I wasn't looking after myself. And looking after myself is far more than just, getting a good night's sleep, for example, as absolutely important as that is. And quite often leaders forget to truly lead themselves first. And so that's the essence of what I talk about.
It's the mistakes and the war stories that we have that then make us relatable to other people, because it's you meet people at where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And
to hear.
Yeah, one of the things that I was really blown away by, as I went through my healing journey and my professional journey, and then was more open to conversations with people about their problems and issues and whatnot. And when it comes to psychology, Kev makes a really good pilot, right? So I'm not a counsellor, not a psychologist, but you do learn some of the art of having delicate, emotional, personal conversations with people, and particularly when you open yourself up, people see that they can trust you to open themselves up. And one of the things there were two things that I came to learn really quickly. One was that there are very common threads that run through so many of our personal problems, our personal issues. The exact details may well be different, but the threads are so similar. And the reason I worked that out, the reason I came to conclude that is, as I've now found in a whole bunch of texts, it's all there anyway. But people would come up to me after a presentation and say, "Kevin, thank you so much. You've given me permission to talk about my divorce." So I didn't talk about divorce. I talked about a wife who didn't leave me. How did divorce come out of my presentation? And when I chat to them a bit more, they felt a level of shame and embarrassment for getting divorced, either in one case for cultural reasons, in another case for family reasons, in another case just because of the standard that he'd set himself. And he felt that he had failed his own standard. And the first fella felt that he had failed his cultural expectations, and felt a level of shame and burden for having a divorce. And so that common thread of shame, for example, that common thread of embarrassment, absolutely universal in the way it then locks people up. And yeah, absolutely. And so in my presentations and workshops and programs with people, it's one of the things that I'm able to do is to, partly through my own story, my own experiences, but then help unlock those things that have really caged people in the past.
And that's what it's all about, right? There's a great joy in having an impact on a person, or seeing a tear or an aha moment on recognition that it's okay to feel like this. And because we forget as human beings how much we need to belong, how much we need to be not judged, how much we have to run with the pack. We think, oh, it doesn't affect me, but it's deep to the core.
No, absolutely is. Yeah, belonging is so critical to our well-being. Absolutely critical. And and basically from birth, if we don't have someone to take care of us at birth, we will die. We can't live by ourselves at birth. And so it's absolutely essential that we have a continued sense of belonging, a continued sense that we're a part of someone and someone is looking out for us for our best well-being.
Kevin, your journey and your story is remarkable. you know, and it's got depth and connection, which is why you're a great speaker. I mean, who are you working for? Who's bringing you in? What types of organizations or companies are inviting you to speak?
Yeah, so it's actually, you know, when I first started off, I thought it was going to be male veterans, but I soon realized that anyone with a head and a heart is my audience. And that said, though, my target is what I call high risk, high reliability industries. And that's because, and people think military and emergency services. Yep, sure, they're high risk, high reliability. But I tell you what, the healthcare industry is high reliability. They need to make sure they get it right again and again. The food and beverage industry is high reliability, because if they, you know, an outbreak of salmonella or whatever the case may be, big problems, right? Telcos, when Telstra or Optus go offline, all of a sudden, a whole bunch of businesses and the general public have got problems. So what I came to realise is high risk, high reliability industries, and risk might be financial, physical, reputational risk, whatever the case may be, and then reliability is what it is. But high risk, high reliability industries, the stakes are higher, and when the stakes are higher, the pressure's higher. And I've spent 30 years in high stakes, high pressure environments. And you know, that's the environment that I get, that's the environment that I thrive in, and that's the environment that I connect and I relate to well. So you know, anything from defense industry to national gyms, the latest one that I've been talking to about a program there. You know, the sugar industry, for example, agriculture, maritime industry, again, some physical risk as well as you know, reliability requirements there as well. So yeah, quite a broad spectrum.
Wow. And how can I mean, anyone who's watching this video is going to resonate in some level. You know, how do people get in touch with you? How can we have a conversation with you about inviting you into our organizations? Yep.
So my website is my name, to keep it really simple. And and Humphreys is spelled HUMPHREYS .com.au, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Again, just look for my name and you'll find me.
Kevin, thank you very much for sharing your story, sharing your time, and of course for that keynote at District 32 last week. Can't recommend you highly enough for any organization, any leader, any manager, anyone in these high risk organizations to begin a conversation with yourself. But thank you for the work that you do, Kevin. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Lorraine. It's been a joy to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.